alongside giants, where fallen angels walked among us and forbidden secrets were taught to humanity. It sounds like fiction or mythology, doesn't it? But what if I told you these events are clearly written in the forgotten pages of biblical history? A dark past that few dare to investigate, hidden beneath the veil of comfortable and safe religiosity. Are you ready to uncover what really happened before the flood? Today, we live in a world collapsing morally and spiritually. But is this reality truly unprecedented? Or are we repeating something that has already occurred in the distant past? The antediluvian world wasn't just destroyed by water, it was consumed by corruption, human pride, and spiritual forces we rarely speak of. This video will reveal secrets, evidence, and truths that could change your perspective on biblical history, and perhaps on yourself. If you've ever wondered what planet Earth was like before the greatest judgment in human history, stay with me until the end of this video. I promise it won't just be a historical lesson, but a powerful warning for the days we live in now. Leave a comment below. Tell us which city and country you're watching from, and let's start the conversation. Subscribe to the channel and like this video. Your support is very important and helps us continue this journey of light and purpose. Thank you so much. In the beginning of everything, there was only the Word, the creative voice that broke the absolute silence and gave form to what was once chaos and void. With a single command, light overcame darkness, and thus time, matter, and space began. In 6 days, a majestic order was established. Heavens and earth, waters and firmament, light and shadow, plants, animals, perfect cycles. Every detail, every creature, every breath obeyed a higher harmony, like a symphony conducted by the very hands of God. Creation wasn't just beautiful, it was sacred. On the 6th day, God did something different. Not with words, but with his own hands. He shaped man from the dust of the earth, and more. He breathed into him the breath of life. Adam emerged not as just another creature, but as the image and likeness of the Creator. The woman, Eve, was formed from his side, a symbol of unity, communion, and balance. Both were placed in Eden, a garden of delights filled with fruit-bearing trees, crystal-clear rivers, and angelic beings. In that world, there was no war, no death, no pain. But how long would that perfection last? Humanity received a gift and a mission to tend, keep, and rule with wisdom. God walked with them in the cool of the day. There was purity, transparency, the absence of shame, a world where spirituality was visible and heaven was open over the earth. Yet at the center of that paradise, there was also a limit, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Why? What was the purpose of placing a choice at the heart of perfection? That silent boundary carried within it the foreshadowing of a cosmic drama soon to unfold. Amidst divine order, there was also an implicit tension, free will. Adam and Eve were not puppets, but beings with the power to choose. And where there is choice, there is also the possibility of a fall. The universe God created was good, but vulnerable to corruption when the human heart ceased to fully trust its Creator. Eden, though perfect, already bore the seed of the next tragedy. And it is precisely here, on the boundary between order and chaos, between heaven and earth, that the first whispers of the serpent emerge, an agent of cosmic disturbance, a spirit of rebellion that would dare to sow doubt. But who was this serpent? And what was the first step toward the destruction of the world before the flood? The serpent was cunning, more than any beast of the field. But was it merely an animal? Or was there an intelligence behind it, a fallen force, an ancient adversary of the divine plan? The Bible doesn't reveal every detail, but what is known is that this creature became the instrument of a fatal suggestion. You will not surely die. The seed of doubt was planted. Eve looked, desired, touched, and ate. Adam in silence followed her steps, and thus the forbidden fruit became a sentence. In that moment, something invisible broke within humanity. Innocence was torn away. Their eyes were opened, but what they saw was shame. They tried to cover themselves with leaves, to hide among the trees, to silence the Creator. The man who once walked with God now hid from him. The fall was not merely moral, it was spiritual, existential, and cosmic. And with it came corruption, death, and separation between Creator and creature. God, with a voice both firm and merciful, calls out, "Adam, where are you?" That question still echoes today. After the judgment came exile. Eden was sealed off. Cherubim with flaming swords guarded the way to the tree of life. And in the human heart, an emptiness was born. Paradise was not destroyed, but closed. The original world still remained in part, but now stained. A new cycle began, marked by the pain of childbirth, the sweat of labor, and the struggle against the earth and against oneself. Yet even in the midst of judgment, God left a promise. The seed of the woman would crush the serpent's head. A prophetic echo, barely whispered, in the midst of the curse. This thread of hope would stretch across generations. But what would happen now that man carried within him the weight of sin? How would this affect Adam's children and the world around them? Blood, still yet to be spilled, was about to stain the ground. Creation, once pure, was now under tension. The serpent had not disappeared. The inclination toward evil was growing. The human heart, once shaped in the image of God, was now increasingly drawn to pride, envy, and violence. And it was in this fertile ground for sin that the first murder emerged. And with it, a new level of corruption that brought the world closer to the conditions that preceded the flood. The man knew the woman, and from her came the firstborn sons, Cain and Abel. Two brothers, two offerings, two destinies. Abel brought the best of his flock with faith and reverence. Cain, on the other hand, brought the fruit of the ground, but his heart was distant, marked by pride. God looked with favor on Abel and his offering, but rejected Cain's. And then something ancient, something dark, began to stir in the firstborn's heart: envy. Instead of repenting, Cain allowed anger to consume him. God in his mercy warned him, "Sin is crouching at your door. Its desire is for you, but you must rule over it." A clear warning, a chance to turn back. But Cain chose to silence God's voice and give in to hatred. He invited his brother to the field, and there, far from the eyes of the world, blood was spilled for the first time. The ground, once a source of life, now drank in death. What have you done? The voice of your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. These words from God to Cain reveal something profound. Innocent blood has a voice. The earth, once a blessing, now became cursed because of man's violence. Cain was condemned to wander, bearing a mark, a sign, a burden of guilt. And thus was born the concept of exile within one's own world, of a wanderer without rest. But why didn't God destroy him? The line of Cain grew, and with it, civilization expanded. Cities were founded, musical instruments and iron tools were developed. But along with culture, wickedness also grew. Lamech, a descendant of Cain, boasted of killing a man for a wound and declared that his vengeance would be 77-fold. The spirit of violence, arrogance, and godlessness spread across the earth like a silent plague. Meanwhile, another son was born to Adam and Eve, Seth, and it was through him that people began to call on the name of the Lord once again. A line of hope, a contrast to the growing corruption. Two paths were forming in history, one of death and one of devotion. But how long would devotion endure in the face of the relentless advance of sin? The stage was being set for a cosmic rupture, and beings even darker were about to cross the boundary between heaven and earth. As men began to multiply upon the face of the earth, something supernatural occurred. The biblical text in Genesis 6 presents one of the oldest and most unsettling mysteries in sacred history. The sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves from all whom they chose. But who were these sons of God? Angels, rebellious celestial beings. Apocryphal tradition, especially the Book of Enoch, leaves no doubt. They were watchers, angels who abandoned their heavenly abode to corrupt the earth. These fallen angels, led by Semjaza, sealed a pact on Mount Hermon. They descended to earth, took human women, and from them were born a hybrid race, the Nephilim, giants, beings of extraordinary stature and power. They were not only physically immense, but also spiritually corrupt. They ruled over men, spread terror, and fed not only on animals but also on humans. The world, already leaning towards sin, plunged into even deeper decay with the arrival of these beings. And the Watchers did not stop there. They taught men secrets that did not belong to them, how to make swords and weapons of war, how to craft mirrors, jewelry, and enchantments. Azazel, one of their leaders, taught forbidden arts, seductive cosmetics, and occult magic. Women became instruments of perversion. The earth, once governed by the harmony of Eden, was now a field of experimentation for rebellious spiritual beings. The boundary between the natural and the supernatural had been broken. The Book of Enoch recounts that the cries of the earth rose to the heavens. Innocent blood cried out, creatures wept, and men devoured one another in wars inspired by the fallen angels themselves. Creation was being destroyed from within. Giants were corrupting the land, enchantments were poisoning the human mind, and structures of power were being built on fear. The roots of chaos grew deeper. Humanity had not only turned away from God, it had joined forces with those who defied him. But Tadi, how would the Creator respond to the desecration of his masterpiece? How long would heaven remain silent in the face of such destruction? Judgment was not merely imminent, it was already beginning to move. A heavenly sentence was about to be proclaimed, and with it, a new kind of total cleansing. The earth, once filled with the glory of the Creator, now lay corrupted to its core. Genesis states clearly, "The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually." There was no rest for sin, no pause in violence. Each generation seemed more depraved than the last. Wickedness was no longer an occasional deviation. It had become the new normal. Spiritual, moral, and physical corruption were so intertwined with humanity that almost nothing pure remained. The Nephilim and the sons of the Watchers had turned the world into an unlivable place. The ground bled, the seas were tainted, the heavens were silent, but the righteous cried out. Enoch, prophet and scribe of righteousness, was taken up to intercede before the Most High. According to the apocryphal account, he heard the pleas of the faithful celestial beings calling for justice. And then the divine response came. A decree would be issued, a global judgment. God declares the decision with sorrow. "I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth." But the divine heart was not driven by blind rage. It was moved by a deep zeal for the integrity of his creation. The world had been corrupted. All flesh had corrupted its way, not just humanity. Even the animals, under the influence of the Watchers' manipulations, were defiled. The rupture was systemic, total, profound. It could no longer be repaired. It had to be restarted. The fallen angels would be imprisoned in the depths of the earth. Their children, the giants, would be annihilated through wars and judgments. The waters of the heavens, the fountains of the deep, and the very elements would be summoned to purify the planet. But before that, the divine gaze found a single man among millions, someone who still walked with God amid the darkness. Noah, a righteous man, a remnant, a survivor of the ancient faith. And here, in the silence before the storm, begins the preparation of a vessel that would defy not only the waters, but the very collapse of humanity. Why was Noah chosen, and what would he have to face as the bearer of Earth's last chance? Amid the rot of humanity, one name shone like a solitary flame in the darkness: Noah. Scripture declares, "Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord." But why him? What set him apart in a world where even the thoughts of the heart were continually evil? Noah was blameless in his generations, a righteous man who walked with God. His faith was not theoretical, it was practical, persevering, and quiet. He walked against the current of a world drowning in madness, and because of this, God called him. The revelation did not come as a vague vision or subtle intuition. God spoke clearly. The end of all flesh had come. And with the sentence came instruction: make for yourself an ark of gopher wood. This was not just a boat. It was a capsule of hope, a sign of obedience, a testimony against a wicked generation. The ark would be built amid scorn, disbelief, and mockery. A monument of faith in the heart of a crumbling society. Noah obeyed in everything. Every measurement, every level, every compartment was made according to divine instruction. The sound of wood being cut echoed not only as construction, but as prophecy. As he hammered, he proclaimed. As he raised the walls, he preached righteousness. According to Peter, Noah was a preacher of righteousness. But who listened to him? How many mocked that old man building a ship where there was no sea? Time passed, generations came and went, and humanity's madness only increased. But Noah continued. Without seeing, he believed. Without support, he acted. And most astonishing of all, God commanded that animals of every kind enter the ark, 2 by 2, 7 by 7, according to their kind. How could that be possible? The Creator moved his own creation toward salvation. It was as if the earth, already wounded and groaning, began guiding its last remnants of life into the shelter of judgment. A silent exodus of creatures, a foreshadowing that something immense and irreversible was about to happen. But the time of building was also the time of divine patience. Years and years of hammer and wood, years of preaching and mockery, years of extended mercy, until the last nail was driven, the last door was sealed. And then the sky began to darken. Clouds formed, the wind changed, and the signs before the end became visible. But what was that day like? The day God shut the door. The day had come, the most feared, the most ignored. The day many believed would never arrive. After decades of building, preaching, and perseverance, the time of mercy had run out. God then said to Noah, "Go into the ark, you and all your household." It wasn't an invitation, it was a divine command. The righteous and his family set apart, the animals guided in, creation represented in pairs. And when all had entered, something extraordinary happened. It wasn't Noah who shut the door, it was God. The door of the ark closed. And with it, the final chance for repentance closed as well. What did that sound like? Was it gentle, like a final whisper of grace, or thunderous, like a prophetic roar? No one knows. But what is known is that outside, life went on as usual. They married, ate, drank, mocked, until the first thunder tore through the skies. Rain that had never fallen, began to pour. The fountains of the great deep burst open. It wasn't just rain from above. Water surged from beneath the earth, as if the planet itself were bleeding. Judgment came from above and below, closing in on man from all sides. Nature screamed, mountains collapsed, rivers overflowed, homes crumbled, and men ran, shouted, pounded on the ark. But now it was too late. The door, sealed by God, would not be opened by human hands. The antediluvian world, with all its corrupted glory, knowledge, and cities, was being washed by waters of judgment. Giants fell, the wicked drowned, and the ark floated. Yes, it floated over the chaos, over the cries, over death. It was the only refuge amid the destruction, a living reminder that God saves those who fear him, even if everything else falls apart. And inside the ark, silence, darkness, the rocking of the waters, the distant sound of thunder. Was this the end, or only the beginning? Noah and his family were safe, but what would remain of the world when the waters receded? The waters rose, slowly at first, then swiftly. They swallowed valleys, covered fields, climbed over hills, and finally overtook the mountains. Genesis records that even the highest mountains were submerged under the waters by 15 cubits. There was no escape, no shelter. God's judgment spared no corner of human rebellion. It was a new beginning, but also a lament, for what God had created with love was now being purified with pain. The Book of Enoch states that the heavenly angels watched the flood with awe. The spirits of the giants, now dead, became wandering beings upon the earth, giving rise to unclean spirits. The destruction was not merely physical, it was also spiritual. The celestial forces that had rebelled were imprisoned. The world was in suspension. No cities, no laughter, no sounds of celebration. Everything fell silent. The earth entered a state of mourning, a judgment not just to punish, but to cleanse. For 40 days and 40 nights the rains continued. The ark, outwardly just a great wooden vessel, was within the symbol of faith in the face of the end. No anchor, no rudder, no direction but divine providence. Noah and his family did not know where they were, nor where they were going. They simply trusted. And perhaps this is the greatest act of faith, to follow in silence while the world screams, to remain still when everything sinks. Every creature that breathed through its nostrils perished. Humanity, the great empires of the giants, the descendants of Cain, the kingdoms built upon the perverted wisdom of fallen angels, all were buried beneath the waters. The sea became a tomb, and the sky a witness. The story of Earth was wiped clean, erased from the map, except for 8 souls and 1 ark floating above the abyss. It was a reverse echo of creation. Chaos once again covered the world. But God never forgets those who fear him, and even at the height of destruction the promise still stood. When the waters fulfilled their role, something new would be born. But what would this new earth look like? What would remain after the fury of the waters subsided? And then, amid the silence of the waters, Scripture records a phrase that sounds like resurrection. And God remembered Noah. Not that the Creator had forgotten him, but now was the time for restoration. The wind of God, the same that hovered over the waters at creation, began to blow once more across the earth. The fountains of the deep were shut. The windows of heaven were closed. The waters began to recede, slowly revealing the contours of an earth wounded, yet ready for a new beginning. For months, the ark continued to float until it came to rest upon the mountains of Ararat. A silent, almost anonymous landing for the vessel that preserved all terrestrial life. Noah waited. He did not open the door on impulse. He sent out a raven, then a dove. And when it finally returned with an olive branch, he knew. Peace had returned. Judgment had completed its work. The earth was alive again, still wet with tears, but sprouting leaves of hope. Upon leaving the ark, Noah did not seek to build a city, nor to reclaim territory. His first act was to build an altar, a gesture of worship, gratitude, submission. God smelled the aroma of the sacrifice, and there he made a new covenant with humanity. He declared that he would never again curse the ground because of man, even though the imagination of his heart remained evil from childhood. It was as if the Creator had resolved to walk with a broken but beloved race. The promise also included the cycles. Seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, would never cease again. The world, now restarted, bore the marks of the past and the breath of a possible future. But Noah's sons inherited not only salvation, but also human frailty. The seed of evil, though drowned beneath the waters, had not been extinguished, and soon signs would appear that the human heart would once again become a battlefield of wars, idolatry, and towers of pride. And it is in this new world, where rainbows touch the skies and altars are raised, that we will begin to see whether humanity will repeat or redeem its own history. What would come after the flood? What paths would the new generation choose? The earth was ready, but was the human heart? The earth was now a vast new beginning, the blue sky, the renewed fields, visible peace across the surface. But the judgment of the waters had not eradicated man's fallen nature. The human heart remained the same, and sooner or later its scars would be revealed. God blessed Noah and his sons, gave them authority over the animals, and established the rainbow as a sign of his eternal covenant. It was the seal that total destruction would not return, at least not by water. But what should have been the dawn of a new humanity was soon tainted. Noah, the righteous man, planted a vineyard and became drunk, a moment of weakness, a stumble by a man who had survived the end of the world. It was in this setting that a curse fell upon Canaan, the descendant of Ham, after an act of dishonor. Thus, even after judgment, curse and blessing remained intertwined, and the division of nations began to take shape, not by righteousness, but by lineage, by the consequences of inherited sin. From Noah's sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, the peoples of the earth were born. But with them also came kingdoms of pride, towers of vanity, and cultures that over time would drift once again from the Creator. The antediluvian world had been judged, but the echoes of its fall would persist. Like a shadow cast behind the light, corruption still lurked. The spirit of rebellion that began with the serpent and manifested in the watchers still whispered among men. The Book of Enoch reveals that the spirits of the giants, slain in the flood, became wandering demons upon the earth, seducing, deceiving, and leading humanity to repeat the same mistakes. The cities that would later rise, like Babel, Nimrod, and Sodom, would once again bear the marks of that ancient corruption. The cycle, it seems, was only beginning anew. The flood had purified the physical world, but the spiritual awaited a greater judgment. And so, with a new sky, a new earth, a new covenant, and the same spiritual tension as always, the stage is once again set. What will come next? What lessons have been forgotten? And will the next judgment be by water or by fire? The world before the flood is not just a story from the past. It is a terrifying mirror of the human heart, a warning about our capacity to corrupt all that is sacred. Giants, fallen angels, unrestrained violence. These are not merely ancient words, but symbols of the dangers that still surround us. History repeats, cycles turn, and the judgment that once came through water will one day return through fire. Now allow me to ask, what story is your life telling at this very moment? Are you outside the ark, distracted by the noise and fleeting pleasures of this world? Or are you inside, in silence, waiting for salvation? The flood is a painful reminder that the doors will one day close. But today, while there is still time, you can choose to listen, believe, and enter through the narrow gate. Imagine for a moment the sky closing once again, but this time, not with clouds and rain, but with fire and light. The door of grace still open, slowly beginning to shut. Will you be on the inside or the outside? Your decision determines your destiny. Like, subscribe, and comment below the greatest lesson you take from this epic account. May God enlighten your heart, guide your steps, and always be with you.